All right, September is here, and this is when the bass start to put the feed bag on and get ready for the winter months. What that implies is, yeah, fall is a transition period. It is, between summer when they are in predictable areas, and in winter they're in predictable areas. In fall, it's transition, and the weather's changing. We get progressively stronger fronts as time goes on, and bass change their feeding patterns. Now they're going after bait fish, be that perch or shad, bluegill, and these bait fish are always on the move, and so the bass are always on the move too. So it can be a little bit tough, but let's talk about this. I mean, that's the key thing here, is finding the bait fish. Now, of course, you can use your electronics if you're on a boat, and I would recommend using forward-facing sonar or side-facing sonar. You don't want to drive your boat over the top of these balls of shad, for example. But there are better ways to find the bait fish than your electronics, honestly, and that is using visual cues, because you can see a lot farther out than your electronics can. So you're looking for, say, for example, birds that are feeding on bait fish at the surface. Cormorants, those nasty little creatures, they feed on bait fish. If you can find congregations of cormorants, there's probably bait fish nearby. Blue herons walking the shoreline, they also eat bait fish. So those are signs that bait fish are nearby. You can also look on the surface. If you see bait fish busting the surface, especially large groups of them, that's usually there's something underneath chasing them, like bass. It gives you an idea that there's bait fish activity in that area. Now, using electronics, like I said, you can use forward-facing and side scan. You can find bait fish that way. One of the things I like to do is right when I launch the boat is I start scanning right away for any type of activity. I'm looking for an area where the majority of the bait fish are at, or even predator fish. Just a band. Say, for example, it's 15 to 20 feet deep, or let's say 10 to 15 foot deep. Okay, that's where the majority I see fish hanging out at. Well, then I will just target structure that intersects with that depth zone. And a lot of times that's where I start picking up a lot of fish. I haven't even thrown a cast yet. I just got out of launched the boat, and immediately I know where I'm gonna go. Some of you guys that are in tournaments, you're hanging out waiting for that gun to go off, to blast off, and you're talking with your buddies and hanging out. I have my depth finder on, and I'm looking for the activity. I'm already starting to fish, okay? Because here's the deal, if you're a bank fisherman, or a shoreline, you beat the banks all day long, you can spend half the day till you realize, yeah, the fish aren't up that shallow, they're actually deeper. Well, if you just spend 5 minutes on your depth finder, you can figure out the activity level is at 10 to 15 feet deep. You've saved half a day of fishing right there. So targeting and figuring out where the bait fish are at is key for this time of year. Now, you have to use baits that imitate bait fish. Crankbaits are fantastic. Medium diving crankbaits in particular is what I'd be using this time of year. But any time of crankbait, wide wobbling, lots of action crankbaits, that's the kind of thing you want to have. Same thing with swim baits, spinner baits, topwater baits. All these imitate minnows and bait fish. The key with all of these is to downsize them, because right now, the bass are keen on the young of the year. These are all the bait fish that were hatched in spring. They've now grown up to 2 to 4 inch sizes, and that's what the bass are keen on. So a little bit smaller size baits reign supreme right now. So the smaller Zara puppies, the 3 inch to 4 inch Kitech swim baits, for example, right? Just the smaller size baits are gonna rule right now, and you'll catch a lot more fish doing that. Now, like I mentioned, the bass are nomadic right now. They're hard to find, and it is a transition period, which means some bass are still in their summer patterns. They're still deep, while others are ahead of the game and they're up shallow. So let's talk about the deep fish first. They are still in their summer patterns, meaning they are gonna be up where there's steep banks, even abrupt, sharp ledges, or just where an area where the river swings up next to the bank. You got these steeper banks where the bass can move up and down the water column without having to move far laterally. That's where they like to hang out this time of year. And it would even be man-made structures like bridge pilings and dams. And you can go after them using, again, the smaller paddle tail swim baits. You can also use a variety of plastic baits. Small plastic baits. I would do like a rage bug or a rage tail, something like that that imitates a small bait fish. Works really, really well. Working in those deeper waters, even on a Carolina rig or a split shot rig, a tube works really well. 3.5-inch size tube that mimics a bait fish just right. Get it down on those depths using just a jig head on them and working it down along those areas next to the structure. If you've got some kind of cover with that structure, like scattered boulders or stumps, maybe a deep weed line, even better. That makes it more of a hot spot. You can hit those bass that are still in those summer patterns and they're still there and you can still catch them. Now, on the other end of the spectrum is the shallow bass. They're going to be up feeding on any bait fish that are up there. So weedy areas are the main places I would target. You can again target the outside weed lines, the weed edges, or pockets inside of them. And using, again, spinner baits, crankbaits, throwing soft plastic baits, you're pitching them, Texas rig baits up in the weeds. If you've got matted vegetation, throwing a hollow-bodied frog over the top of it can be very, very productive. Those bass are up under there. There's bait fish under there. They've been there all summer long and they're still there feeding, and of course the bass are now up there hunting the bait fish. So you put something across the top that looks alive and the bass are opportunistic. They're going to blast through that thick canopy and nail your frog. Just be ready for the bite. It's exciting. You can also punch plastics through it. Take a rage bug, a beaver style bait on a half ounce to an ounce bullet sinker, pegged. You kind of pop it up in the air and let it hit that canopy. It punches through, and when it breaks that surface and comes down to the bass down below, it gets gobbled up before it even hits the bottom. So those are a couple ways you can hit them, and pay a close attention to hard cover. Bass and baitfish will start to migrate out of the vegetation as September rolls on, and they'll start to move towards hard cover. Things like rocks, stumps, bridge pilings. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they will vacate the vegetation now. So if you find those things interspersed inside of vegetation, even better. But you want to look for those areas because those are going to be hot spots in September. So fishing shallow, fishing deep, making sure you downsize on your baits. That's how you attack bass in September. Looking for those bait fish all the time because that's where they're going to be. Hope that helps. For more tips and tricks like this, visit bassresource.com.